Today we're continuing our sermon series, Come Home for Christmas, and we hear John the Baptist telling us that we need to prepare the way of the Lord. And the things that he is calling us to do can be a lot of hard work on our part, and honestly, preparing the way for the Lord can be scary. The fear of home, the fear of coming home to the Lord, or even the fear of coming to your physical house can sometimes be real. It's always real, and yet it affects some of us more than others. And I know that you sit out here and you look and you think, wow, we don't have that. But many families have that issue of fear coming home. Have you ever been in college and you made a bad grade? A bad grade that was posted or sent home, or someone ratted you out? Was that not a long drive home? Whether it was from high school and you lived 2 blocks over, or whether it was from out of state or whatever, that was a long ride home, wasn't it? There's going to be problems waiting for me at the house. Or maybe you've been gone for a long time and you finally decide to go home and you and your family had some differences. That could be real, that you would have a fear of coming home. Parents, when you find out your kids are coming home, what if you have people waiting for you at home? They're going to meet you at the door with a huge spoonful of something that you don't want to eat. And there they are. And they don't ask. They tell you, oh, try this. I'm good. Try this. Anybody else? Am I the only one? And that's not a big deal, but you think about it, don't you? And you look up here and see the preacher, and you go, I wish I had my life all together, like the preacher does. Or you look around on Sunday and you see everybody all dressed up, but it looks like we don't have any issues. But even your pastor has got issues. Yes, a fear of going home. It can happen. We've just recently moved, and I'm going to be real honest, this past week it was tough for me to go home because of what happened on Monday. Monday morning, getting up early, getting our day started. I didn't have my glasses on. My wife, Laura, did not have her glasses on. And we're still unpacking. There's still boxes everywhere. And she says, have you seen my lipstick? I didn't have my glasses on, and I looked down, and it's right here. So I handed it to her. She didn't think anything of it. Everything's scattered all over the house. What I handed her, on accident, was one of those Gorilla glue sticks. Are y'all familiar with that? By accident, people, okay? I am not a mean preacher. I have been mean in the past. I can get mean in moments, but it was not done out of meanness. But I'm not going to lie. Monday night through last night, coming home was kind of scary. And I'm going to be real honest. She's still not speaking.
Did you kiss her?
No, I did not kiss her. Think about all the things that can cause you to have a fear of coming home. Maybe that home is coming home to Christ's holy church. God has been at work in our lives and in the lives of everyone this morning and throughout our lives, calling us to come home. And yet it is scary, if you've been gone for a long time, to come home, thinking that everybody knows everything that you've done, or changing a lifestyle, or not knowing how to dress, or I've got long hair and no shoes. There are lots of things that can make it scary, because sometimes we're not very nice to people that come in the door. And we let them know, you're not dressed right. We let them know you don't have a Bible. We let them know all of these things, whether we realize we do or not. Think about going to a new church for the first time, or just having been gone for a while. This pandemic has prevented people from being where they really want to be. And yet, even in that, there's some fear in coming back. Am I going to be sick? Is the person that's coughing next to me got something that's going to be deadly to me? Or is it just seasonal? There are a lot of things that can bring about fear of coming home, whether it's to your physical home or your church home. Or what if the preacher calls me out in the middle of the service? This is the arrangement I have with my wife. And yes, I'm going to be faithful to it. When I call her name out, I have to buy lunch. So don't worry about me calling her out, because she really enjoys it. And she has grown to love, as my budget has diminished over the years, because of mentioning her a lot. She's gotten to where she enjoys McDonald's and the dollar meal. Not that I'm cheap. Yeah, I'm cheap. There's a lot of fear in our lives about what God is calling us to do. Prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight His paths. Fill in the valleys. Bring those mountains down. Anything that's rough, make it smooth. One of the many things that I've done in my life that God has blessed me with was being a dirt contractor. When I was a little kid, I rode many an hour on the back of a dozer while my dad built houses, and I fell in love with it. And so when I got older, I thought that's what I wanted to do, and I bought a dump truck and a bulldozer, and it was a nice one. It was a John Deere 650. It had a cab, it had an air conditioner, it had a radio, it had a grilled cheese sandwich holder, it had everything. And the same thing with my dump truck. I had a 2000 Western Star, brand new. They built a bed for it, and I went into the dirt working business. And one of the things I bought for my dozer was a laser level system. And they had, at that time, GPS systems as well. But I bought the laser level. And when people would ask me to build house pads for them or driveways, most especially house pads, you have to go out and do exactly what John the Baptist is calling us to do. You have to remove everything that's going to be a problem when you're building a house pad. You can't build on top of grass or anything that's going to rot away and cause foundation issues. You have to dig down and push all of that out of the way. So I would get there with my dozer, and I would get the guys ready to start hauling me some dirt. But before they would bring the dirt in, I would go in and scrape everything down to more solid ground. And then they would bring in some of this wonderful, there was a dirt pit here in town that had some wonderful clayey sand. It was a sand-clay mixture that would really pack down and make a solid foundation. And while I enjoyed the air conditioning in that dozer, they would bring it in, and I would get out and I would set my laser up on a tripod, and it would level a foundation every 1,000 feet. If I started at that laser and went 1,000 feet in any direction, it would be level to within 1/8 of an inch. That's level. And I would start running that dozer, and then I would get my laser set up. There was an attachment, a pole that I would put on my blade, and it had a receiver on the top. And I would set that laser up and get it spinning. And then I would back over in the corner of that foundation, and I would engage the system to where it would start looking for that laser. And I would set my blade where I wanted it set. I would lower the receiver until it picked up the laser. And that was almost all I had to do. I would engage that blade, and it would operate off of that laser. And my part would be to gently and slowly start moving forward. I had to control the direction of where it went, and the laser on its part kept everything perfectly level. It was beautiful. And after I would get that done, I would bring some sand in, a nice soft base, and then they were ready to pour concrete. I was the best dozer operator around when I was totally relying on that laser. If you had taken that laser system away from me and told me to go out and you put stakes down and you put flags out, my eyes were not that sharp. I had not put in enough time in the dozer business for me to be that good like the gentleman that I rode with. He was an artist. I had a blade that would go everywhere. I could adjust it in every direction. He had an old dozer that would go up and down, and yet he could do better than me with a laser. Because that's what God had called him to do. I later found out in life that God, and there's nothing wrong with being a dozer operator or a truck driver, if that's what you've been called to do. I found out in my dozer one day that that's not what I was called to do. I had the perfect job. I was out in the middle of nowhere. No one to bother me. I was doing some subcontracting for the railroad, and they broke for lunch, and I backed my dozer away from the tracks and lowered it down and idled it down, and I had that cold AC going, and I got out my lunch, and I was listening to Christian radio, KVNE, and God spoke through me to me. I looked around and it was the most beautiful scenery. Should have been praising God for where I was. And God pointed my gifts out to me. And in a quiet voice, he said to me, "What are you doing out in the middle of nowhere? I've given you speaking abilities." And out loud, I said to myself, "Tommy Earl, what are you doing here?" And that was the beginning of me getting serious with what John calls us to be serious about. That just like I was concerned about making sure a house pad was level, and that there was a solid base there underneath that small few inches of sand, that's how God was calling me to be in my life. You see, for me, getting rid of the rough edges, filling in the low places, bringing down the high places, was all about me getting back to where I needed to be. Looking at my gifts and my graces and asking myself, is this where God wants you to be? And it wasn't. And that was the day that I realized I need to work on my foundation. And that just like in the dirt business, when I relied heavily, totally on a house pad, on that laser, I began to live my life in that manner towards God finally. You see, at that point in my life, I wasn't doing a lot of the things that God was calling me to do. Stay in His Word daily. Pray daily. I was close to God. I went to church all the time, but there was a deeper commitment. There was some really hard work that God was wanting me to do in my life, and I wasn't doing it. I was skating by like I did in college. Any other C students here? Now, I'm not an ordinary C, I'm a C+, okay? That is bragging rights for your pastor. And you know why that's bragging rights for me in seminary? It's because I had a family. And I made sure to the best of my abilities I didn't miss very much. And I was willing to take a less grade and try to make some of my kids' things when I was away in Dallas. Okay, let's be honest, Tommy Earl. If I hadn't had a family, it'd still been C+. Okay, moving on. Moving on, but I'm glad y'all brought that up. Just as I trusted that laser to keep me level, we need to trust God to keep us level. And God's calling on us to work on our lives. God is calling us to remember what it was like, if we can remember it. When was the first time we came into church? What was that like for us? Think about visitors that are coming in. Are we treating them like family? Are we tolerating the way people talk or dress or look or act? All of those things are God calling us to work on our foundation. See, I used to be a real good bulldozer when it came to everybody else. I could make you into who you needed to be, whether I had to shout at you or scream at you. And God said, why don't you put that energy into you, Tommy Earl? And I've never been more content in my life, knowing that I'm not responsible for anybody. I'm not even responsible for my own kids. I shared with you that I went to counseling, and one of the greatest things in counseling that God through my counselor gave me was this: Tommy Earl, set your kids down when they turn 18 and tell them the truth. And here's the truth: you have been a gift from God. And up until now, I have been responsible for you, and now you are on your own, and I'm going to trust you back to God. I want to encourage you to do that with your kids if you haven't. And do that with the person that's sitting next to you in your head. It'll freak them out if you turn around and do it aloud, okay? I'm telling you right now, it'll make them nervous. But for the people that you just don't understand why they come to church dressed that way, why they look that way, why they act that way, trust them to God. And work on you. And you know what's going to happen? One of these days, and if you're listening, I didn't point to my ear the first time. If you're listening, I can't hear your thoughts, so don't worry about that. They're going to give you an opportunity to talk about your Christ. They're going to give you an opportunity to talk about God. You're going to be given opportunities to talk about how God has changed your life. Whether they're sitting next to you here or sitting next to you at a restaurant. And that could be the beginning of an invitation for them to come to Christ, because of all of the hard work that God and you have done in your life. Just like that laser did its work, and I had to be faithful to capture that laser and set the proper height, I also had to do my part to move the dozer around, to disengage the system, raise the blade, back up to another starting point, and do it all over again, over and over and over. And I had to walk that pad in. I had to make it to where it was a solid foundation where people's homes would not be moved. And God is calling us to do that as well. Because your day's coming. And you need to make sure that foundation is solid. For one of these days, there's going to be a ground-shaking event for you. And you're going to need Christ more than ever. I remember that happened to me early on in life. And I didn't have a clue what to read in my Bible. But I picked it up and I turned to the New Testament. And it wasn't long before I got to exactly what I needed. How I wished I had been there sooner. There's work to be done. It's to be done upon ourselves. That's who you need to be concerned with. And everyone else, I want to encourage you to love them and trust them to God. And I want to give you this encouraging word. My parents both prayed for me. And everything that I did, every single day, one or both of them were praying for me. And they never got to see the day that I went into the ministry. Neither one of them. God is faithful. Amen? Whoever it is you're struggling with, whether it's family or friends or strangers, love them, and trust them to God, and pray for them often. Our challenge this week is for us to think about our lives, and I want you to wrestle with this question this week. Am I preparing myself for the time when Christ will return in final victory? Am I preparing myself for the time when Christ will return in final victory? I don't know about you all, but I never had trouble preparing myself for work, or for school, or for hunting, or for fishing, or anything else. But it was many, many years before I got serious about my walk with Christ. Am I preparing myself for the time when Christ will return in final victory? And the next question I want you to wrestle with is this: is anything keeping me from coming home for Christmas? In other words, is there anything in your life that you need to doze out of the way? Are there any low spots that need to be filled up? Are there any high places that need to be brought down? Is there any part of your foundation, of your faith, that needs work? The fear of home is real. So let's make sure, let's put in the work. God is doing His part every day faithfully. Let us do our part faithfully to make sure that everyone feels welcomed as God and as we offer Christ's invitation for all of us to come home for Christmas.